Welcome to the show. Welcome to another week. It's IB Nation Sports Talk, and it's Black Monday in NFL circles, but this is Good Monday in terms of Notre Dame football recruiting today. That's why we've got the man Ryan Roberts, our Notre Dame football recruiting analyst, with us today. What's up, man?
Not much, Sean. It's always an absolute pleasure to be invited on this show, man. It doesn't happen too often, so I relish these opportunities. I really do.
I mean, we would have you more, but I know that you've got like at least 4 jobs that you've got going on out there. So there's only
And
so much we can stretch you. You're not
well, and this
made
the
of
six
silly
o'clock
putty.
the 6 o'clock show does stretch into bedtime a little bit for
Mm-hmm.
the couple of the kiddos as well. So yes, but I appreciate it being on and always. I saw that Tommy Guns is really happy to see that I wasn't abducted by the cartels. I would just say this, Tommy, I wasn't on the mailbag today because I was hoping to miss you, so I didn't have to see you in the chat. But here we are, sir. I'm back. I'm back in here.
Yep. Jumping in with us. Vince is going to be along in a little bit. We've got plenty of topics we're going to hit in rapid fire. We've got, of course, the national championship game coming up tonight, so we will touch on that in rapid fire and some other Notre Dame topics as well. But we start with the big recruiting news of the day. 2025 safety Ethan Long from Connecticut committed to Notre Dame just within about the last half hour or so. We were all waiting and waiting and waiting, and that finally happened. But the 6'2", 185-pound safety chose Notre Dame over a list of other schools that included Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, Wisconsin. He currently ranks as a 4-star and the number 27 safety in the 2025 recruiting class. And Notre Dame's already received another commitment from an elite Florida safety, Ivan Taylor, from the 25 class. And they got a big commitment over the weekend in Chicago defensive lineman Christopher Burgess. So things going really well right now. Tell us how all this went down, Ryan, the commitment today of Ethan Long.
Well, I mean, before the show, I was joking with you, and it's part joking, but it's also part not. Is that Notre Dame? I mean, purely has just been the number one team for Ethan Long for several months. Like back, no hyperbole. If you would have asked me in August, where do I think Ethan Long's going to go? I would have said Notre Dame, like before the season even started. It's been Notre Dame and then just a little chasm, and then the rest of the Midwest powers basically after that. Ohio State, I think, did a pretty good job. I think Michigan did a good job. Penn State even had a little bit of traction at some points. Wisconsin actually did a surprisingly good job, but this one was always Notre Dame. It really was, because I think, Sean, he was one of the players that has really been blowing up from the 2025 perspective before the season. He was camping everywhere, and he actually was one of the players that camped at Notre Dame and got an offer. And pretty much from the onset of him getting his offer, he became a priority pretty quickly because Notre Dame saw him at camp. They saw him in person. They saw the 6'2", they saw the 185 pounds. They saw the movement skills. As a sophomore, he played at a different high school, not at Brunswick School, and he was asked to do a little more as far as playing from depth, true free safety role. Now, the last 2 years here at Brunswick School, they've asked him to be a little bit more of a downhill, play in the box a little bit more, underneath zone, that type of dude. But you've really seen his game just evolve from a versatility perspective. And this was a guy that for several months Notre Dame has been pushing for. And I had it, I think one of my last interviews was with him in, I think, early December. I had something on the site about it. And I had basically asked him, like, timeline, like, is there an update on when you would like to commit? And he had said at that point, like, probably sometime end of December. Obviously, it stretched a little bit into early January here, but ultimately, we got here because Notre Dame quickly, after they saw him in person, said, that's a guy that we need. That's a guy that we want in the class. It is a very important year for safety recruiting for Notre Dame in 2025, because everybody knows that followed 2024. It was a little bit up and down, right, as far as how we got to the final process.
Mm-hmm.
So far, getting Ethan Long on top of getting Ivan Taylor, on top of potentially not being done as well. Ethan Long was a player that Notre Dame wanted for a long time, and they were able to obviously finally finish the deal here.
Well, I mean, safety has been an area, consistent safety recruiting. Obviously, you have a guy like Kyle Hamilton. That was huge. But other than that, again, consistency of the position has been an issue for this program. So this has got to be huge to get two guys like this in the same class.
I mean, if you're just talking about the last like 3 years or so, Sean, I mean, 2022, Notre Dame basically struck out at safety. I mean, they were in a solid position for Xavier Nwankpa, who ended up eventually going to Iowa. Everybody knows the backstory on that one and the visit that took place there. But they end up only signing Jaden Bellamy in that class, who was going to play safety for Notre Dame early on, and he is no longer with the program, obviously. And then you follow up in 2023, where I think you got a good two-man class in Adon Schuler and Ben Minnick, but it could have been a whole lot better. I mean, you had Peyton Bowen committed at one point. You had Brandon Hillman that actually did sign at Notre Dame on National Signing Day, but obviously it never enrolled due to the academic stuff that we've touched on many times. And then 2024 was a mess, man. It was. I think you ended up in a solid spot comparative to where I thought they were going to be at one time. You get a high upside guy in Bronte Johnson out of the state of Indiana, obviously. You get Kenny Urlacher and Tabron Benny Powell, who I think are solid football players, but you didn't really move the needle outside of of Bronte Johnson's upside, right? So Notre Dame really needed a big 2025 class. Getting Ivan Taylor early, getting Ethan Long second, and then Notre Dame is also going to push for a third safety in this class, a particular football player that we'll talk about in a little bit. But you're absolutely correct. Safety dividends have not paid off. I think it's going to continue to pay off, though, moving forward, because now that Kyle Hamilton is not just 14th overall first-round pick Kyle Hamilton, he's Pro Bowl All-Pro Kyle Hamilton. I think that that's a much bigger sell, obviously. So I think safety recruiting in 2025 is definitely getting better, and they really needed it to get better because it was not great over in a couple year span there.
I think everyone's kind of fixated on understandably so. I mean, everyone wants to have the number one recruiting class in the country if you can. They've got the number one class right now. So you add this to it, and that just kind of continues to strengthen this class, I would think.
It does. And I think the one cool thing too, if you're talking about the hunt for number one, if Notre Dame's ever to get a number one class, this is one of the years where it could be possible. Again, I think that it's always going to be a help against Notre Dame a little bit because some of the SEC schools, the Georgias, the Alabamas of the world, the Texas A&Ms in a given year, like they're going to be able to spend late and kind of push their number up. You know, the Oregons of the world as well included in that conversation. But Notre Dame is going to have a big class in 2025. That's like another note, Sean, is that 2024, you ended up with 23 commits. For a long time, we kept telling everybody that this is going to be a smaller class in 2024 because Notre Dame loves so many guys that they're on early in 2025. They are on them big time. So I wouldn't expect this one to be a 23-man class in 2025. I would expect this 25 plus, maybe getting up to 27, 28. There's going to be big numbers in 2025, and Notre Dame's going to have a chance to at least be a top three-ish type of class in 2025 because they're off to a great start. When you have a legitimately potentially elite quarterback in Deuce Knight, and you have Ivan Taylor, who's a top 30 player according to multiple platforms. You are in on some big time offensive tackles. Obviously, right now you're big on another safety. There's wide receivers on the board that Notre Dame likes a ton. I think Notre Dame has a chance to have a very good class in 2025 and the highest ranked one and probably the best overall one in the Marcus Freeman era so far. It has that upside, I think.
Brandon wants to know what you like about him, what you like about Ethan Long, his strengths. Well, maybe just talk about his game a little bit.
I mean, Brandon, it's really cliche to say because the young man's last name is Long, but like the first thing that pops off is he's 6'2". Yeah, I mean, John, he's 6'2". He reports a 75.5-inch wingspan, and he's, again, only 16 years old, so he's going to get bigger. He's going to get stronger. He probably has another growth spurt in him. So he is what was Marcus Freeman's thing that he wanted to do the minute he came to campus? Not even talking about him as a defensive coordinator. When he got here initially, from his defensive perspective, what did he want to do? He wanted to get longer, and he wanted to get more athletic. And Ethan Long certainly adds to that. That length that he has shows up on film because what he's able to do from a versatility perspective is because of the athletic traits he has. One, he's a smooth mover. One, he's a good mover. Two, he's incredibly long. So that allows him to not only play from depth and to have a little bit of range on the back end, it also allows him to come up. It allows him to play some man-to-man coverage against some bigger slots, tight ends on the next level. And I think he has good ball skills. I think he has really good length. And I think he's just a solid overall athlete all around. I don't know if I would necessarily say he's elite in any capacity, but I think he's got solid to good short area quickness. I think he's got solid to good range on the back end. He's just a really good overall athlete at the position, on top of having the frame that he has to add even more weight and moving forward. He's a good tackler too, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's probably the thing that kind of stood out just watching some of the film that I saw him today is the tackling. And you do see him, not just playing, free safety and back there playing center field and stuff like that. You do see him playing up closer to the line of scrimmage and playing some man to man and using some of that physicality that he's got as well.
Well, I mean, because the one thing that I love, Sean, is that coaches for the most part are pretty smart, right? If I put Ethan Long back at depth and I just ask him to play true free safety, you can avoid that guy, right? Because he's going to be playing, heels at 15 or heels at 12, whatever, and being able to work from depth. There are ways to manipulate and to not have to deal with that type of player. But when you're able to also rotate him down in the box, rotate him into the slot, it's hard to avoid a guy that can just be in a lot of different areas. That's why a lot of really good corners on the high school level, like Cree Thomas, that's committed to Notre Dame in the 2025 class. As a junior, they threw him at safety because they wanted to utilize him everywhere, not just on one side of the field. They want to be able to kind of put him in different spots so that you can't eliminate him. And I think that's the big thing with Ethan is that he can make an impact in a lot of different roles on the next level. I could see him playing a little bit of big nickel. I could see him playing free safety. I could see him playing in a too high system. I could see him coming down into the box. I can see all those things. And I think that upside combined with what you have in Ivan Taylor, because we always have to talk about this, it's a part of a class. And to have Ivan Taylor, who's incredibly smooth, can play a lot of man-to-man coverage. Like, I wouldn't be shocked if Ivan Taylor's a nickel early on in his career at Notre Dame. I wouldn't be shocked at all. Him and the fact that Ethan Long are such different players, they can work together. You can utilize them in different areas of the game and get them on the field at the same time. And then when you add in the other safety that Notre Dame's pushing for heavily in 2025, they have a chance to not only have a great three-man class, but they have a chance to have a three-man class that plays off of one another extremely well. They can be utilized in so many different facets, and they can be used together. This isn't a square peg and round hole. Like people were asking about the defensive line class in 2025 on the board, and they sort of mentioned in like Texas A&M a couple years ago, and they had a great defensive line class, but you knew that it wasn't going to work because you had too many players that did the same thing, right? There wasn't enough diversity in that group. I think what you have so far in the safety class in 2025, you have diversity. You have different body types. You have different types of players. And I think foundationally, it's going to be big time for the safeties on the next level.
Yeah, sounds like it. So you kind of teased this a little bit ago. What's next then at safety for this 25 class?
Well, the one big name that's on the board, and we know that the recruiting world is very volatile at times, right? So things can change, boards can change, players can be added to a board. There's so many guys can basically get, scholarships pulled. Like there's things that happen, right? But ultimately, the guy that Notre Dame is still going to push for heavily is Jadon Blair, who plays out of Mount Tabor in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Now, Sean, I just mentioned that Ethan Long was a pretty long football player, right? 6'2", 185 pounds, 75.5-inch wingspan. Jadon Blair is 6'4", 185 pounds, and he looks, and this is verified because if you actually Google his name with Irish Breakdown attached, one of the first articles I wrote was a picture of him next to Marcus Freeman. And Marcus Freeman's like 6'1", like he's a pretty tall guy for the most part. And he dwarfs Marcus Freeman. Like he makes Marcus Freeman look tiny. This kid is a legitimate 6'4". He looks like a young Kyle Hamilton.
I was going to say like 6'4". That's Kyle Hamilton.
Yes.
Right
and I'm
there,
I'm not so sure that he'll ever get up to 220 pounds like Kyle, but he is going to be 6'4", 205 with length for days. And this is another kid that is very different than the other two. I mean, I seemingly in my mind, I could put three safeties on the field at once because I could say, Ivan Taylor, you're playing nickel. I could say field safety. I'm going to put Ethan Long there because I like to rotate him down a little bit and get him moving downhill. And then I'm going to rotate Jadon Blair from the boundary to the middle of the field at times. So you could legitimately get three safeties on the field at one time just in the 2025 class if you're able to get Jadon Blair, which, by the way, he's most likely going to take a visit in January back to Notre Dame, which would be his third time on campus. He was at three other games last year of Notre Dame opponents. So he saw Notre Dame like 4 times last year from game day visits. he is very high on Notre Dame. So if Notre Dame's able to close on a Jadon Blair, that is the best safety class that they've had in, I don't even know. I would actually have to do research on it. Honestly, like the last time that, because Ivan Taylor's a top 30 player, Sean, by 2 different platforms. Jadon Blair is a top 50 player by at least one platform. He's a dude, man. He has a higher upside than even Ivan does. And then you throw in Ethan Long, who, by the way, is another 4-star caliber football player, a good player overall. That is a crazy, crazy safety class potentially. And Notre Dame is, and I want to repeat this so people, because people are going to ask this a million times, does this mean that they're not going to push for Jadon Blair? I'm telling you all, listen to me, and I'm sure I'll repeat myself a million times at this point. They are going to continue to push for Jadon Blair because he is a player that is just too good for them not to push for.
All right. Very interesting. And that's intriguing to think about that, because like it takes me back to Kyle Hamilton's freshman year when we would see those 3 safety sets out there, and that worked so well for Notre Dame. You know,
I think that's where the game's going, especially for Notre Dame, Sean. I mean, because who's been playing Rover the last couple years? It's been a Jack Kaiser body type, right? A 6'1", 220 something, 230 pound kid who is a true linebacker though. Like, he's not a safety body type.
Right.
The body type though out there at Rover is going to start to look a whole lot more like a safety, in my opinion, moving forward. I mean, next year you're talking about Jalen Sneed, who is 6'1", 215, 210, 215, somewhere in that ballpark, and can move like a safety. And I think some of these kids, like if you told me right now that when you're not in your nickel at one day, Jadon Blair is your starting Rover at 6'4", 210 pounds, I would believe you. I 100% would believe you. I think that is where Notre Dame is moving from that position perspective.
No, and I mean, when you think about how, like, Jack Kaiser had the fewest snaps of the linebackers this year. You know, he had the great rating, you know, and still was very efficient and all that stuff. Just the fact that position has to be off the field so much, but it makes sense what you're talking about. You don't have to take a guy off the field if you have that safety type body playing that position to begin with.
There's a lot of times that that college football catches up to the NFL. And if you ask me from an NFL draft perspective, there's one position that I always just kind of go sour on. I say, no, thank you. That is today's Sam linebacker, which turns into an overhang a lot because you're playing so much spread in the NFL right now. That position doesn't exist, to your point. That position doesn't exist.
Right.
Because if I'm running sub 60+% of the time, I'm taking that guy out and I'm putting a nickel in. That's what I'm doing, right? You take that linebacker out, you get a nickel on the field. With guys now, though, with the Jadon Blairs of the world, if he would come to Notre Dame and maybe potentially play that spot at times, you don't have to take him out, Sean. You don't have to take him out. When you're in your normal set, he's basically a Sam linebacker at 6'4", 210. Then when you're in just your traditional looks, he is a rover, a guy that's going to traditionally play out in space. So I think that position is just being created so differently now, you know, and it's going to continue going that way because, you know, I hate when we say sub package anymore. I hate that terminology because sub package is a base defense now. It is. There was one NFL team last year that ran base defense more than 50% of the time. One single team. And I think that college football, if you're already there, I think that's where it's going because you want to get more speed and more versatility on the field. And I think that getting these many top-notch safeties, that helps it, in my opinion. I think it really does.
Absolutely.
Vance, I thought you were avoiding me, man. What's up?
Never. No, how could I do that? Come on now.
He's just been hanging out, making faces on the back end.
I was, reading through rapid fire, making sure I'm up to date. You know, show
That's
prep.
a first.
Show prep.
Brent wanted to know, he says, no offense to Ryan, where's Jesse?
Wow.
And once again, not spelling Jesse's name right, which, you know, I don't know if that's intentional at this point or what, but
I feel like he's doing it on purpose these days.
It's funny because I was just talking to Jesse and he was venting about Brent coming at him about all his Brock Purdy love all the time these last couple of weeks.
Oh, Brock Purdy. Good old Brock Purdy.
Future Super Bowl champion Brock Purdy, but yeah.
You very well may be right. You very well may be.
Hopefully not. I'm a Rams fan. I would hate to watch the 49ers win a Super Bowl, but that's another conversation for another day. Yeah.
How about that game
Lions
yesterday? I know. I know.
Yeah, it was a weird game, man. Carson Wentz playing on one side, Sam Darnold playing on the other. That was a wild game with the Rams and the 49ers yesterday.
Yeah, Gordian knot. There is no I in Jesse. He said, "How do you spell it?"
With an I. I'm pretty
The
sure
other
that's the female way to spell it, but I could be wrong on that.
Vince, it is the year 2023. We don't assume those things anymore.
You're not preach.
It's very true.
I'm in a public school setting, so you can take that for whichever way you want.
Names, yeah, that's exactly right. All right, Ryan. Anything else on Mr. Ethan Long before we wrap it up?
I will say the funnest thing as a fan of Notre Dame football, and if you like recruiting at all, go follow Deuce Knight on Twitter, because my guy is not shy of letting you all know who he is trying to get to be a part of this class. Okay. So if there's ever any questions of who does Notre Dame want in the 2025 class, go follow Deuce Knight. I mean, literally someone just said, it was hilarious, Vince. Someone said, now all you need is Dallas Golden and Mark Zachary. And he retweeted it and just said, shh, it needs to be a secret. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this guy, man. So 2025 class is exciting, folks. It really is, because you have a great leader of Deuce Knight. You have a very charismatic leader at that, a big 5-star quarterback who I think this is going to end up being Marcus Freeman's best class 2025, in my opinion.
All they got to do is add a kicker.
Vince pushing for the kickers. Shocker.
I specifically in the 25 class.
I was gonna say. Does he reside in Granger, Indiana?
He may.
Vince, they'll bring him back in like 5 years.
Yeah, exactly.
Fifth-year senior. It'd be fine.
Correct. When he's a graduate transfer, and that will be the best year of my life. So that's okay.
I'll go to Middle Tennessee State for 4 years.
Right. I'm a patient man. I am a patient man. It's all good.
All right. Thanks, Ryan. Appreciate it as always.
Thank you, guys. Have a good one.
Okay.
You too, see you, Ryan.
Take care, Ryan Roberts. And of course, if you're an Irish Breakdown subscriber, just follow Ryan, read Ryan's stuff, all of his recruiting stuff. Great stuff all the time. How are you today, Vince?
I'm fantastic. It was my first day back to the day job. And boy, let me tell you, it was a busy one, Sean Stiers. It was not what I expected it anyway, which is one of the things I do enjoy about the job. But when you walk in and there are parents waiting for you, you kind of know what your day
first day back from Christmas break, and you've got parents sitting there in the office,
yes,
in the waiting area. Where is that D'Addario? That's what you want to see.
Yes, waiting for you with court documents. All right, let's go to work.
Oh, brother.
So
sounds like,
that was my
sounds
day.
like not fun. Well, let me turn your day for you, Vince.
Please.
Are you ready for rapid fire?
I'm so pumped that it's just rapid fire. Like I show up, boom.
I know.
We're doing rapid fire.
That's part of the day, right?
This is
Jump
fantastic.
right into it.
And it was a very busy day in the land of sports. So there's plenty to talk about. There's
a lot of things. A lot of things going on. First off, though, shout out Josh from Alabama. He said, I met him at the Notre Dame women's game yesterday. He came up and introduced himself. He said he's originally from Chicago, but he had a little Alabama drawl to him. And he said he's a regular listener of the show, complimented you and Jesse. And so just wanted to say thanks for listening, Josh, and coming up. Good meeting you yesterday.
That's awesome. So, I love when we get to meet people.
I know.
It's funny. And I could be looking way too far into this, but like when I go to basketball games or just walking around in general, and like people kind of stare at you and they're like, and they kind of give you a little side eye and they're not, you know what I mean? And I'm like, I just want to be like Irish Breakdown. Like, it's like, because they're not sure. They're not quite sure. And if I'm not wearing like Irish Breakdown stuff or whatever, but I also don't want to assume that that's why they're giving me the side eye. Like it could be just like, look at that doofus or something like that.
Right.
They could be thinking that about me too,
DK says it's preposterous that we're starting rapid fire at 6:24. I mean, that's what happens. I had a whole different show planned for today. And then I found out about the Ethan Long commit at 5:00. And so the first part of the show became, we don't always do recruiting stuff.
I know.
On IB Nation.
It was a nice little curveball. It's a little different, Yeah.
It's good to have Ryan on. We need to have him on more often, but he's got all those kids there at his house. And he's got, like 5:30 bedtimes and everything else. So, all right, fill in the blank. It's blank that Joe Alt, Xavier Watts, Audric Estime, and Sam Hartman are included in ESPN's list of the top 100 college football players this season.
I will say it is interesting. And I mean interesting in a positive way and in a negative. Like, how do you not have Howard Cross a part of this particular crowd? In my opinion, and I realize, Howard Cross does not meet the classic definition of a defensive lineman, right? The big, whatever, but like he was super productive. Like, I'm surprised that he was not on this list. And I guess at the same time, surprised that Sam Hartman is on the list.
I am, and Hartman barely made it.
He was 99, wasn't he? Yeah.
That's right. He
Yeah.
just got in there. I mean, you're absolutely right, though. Like, when you think about it, how do you not have Howard Cross on the list? He led all interior defensive linemen in tackles this season. And you don't see defensive tackles. You don't see nose guards having the kind of tackle production that he had in a year. And I get it. He's not probably rated higher in terms of the draft and all that different kind of stuff, but neither is Hartman. There's a million other quarterbacks rated ahead of Hartman in this
complete afterthought. Every time I've seen people talking about quarterbacks in the draft, his name doesn't even come up.
Yeah.
Doesn't even come up.
Quite frankly, I was shocked that it's no offense to Hartman, but I was shocked that he ends up in the top 100. Again, like you can go to what, like you've kind of been trumpeting with the fact that the offense ended up doing what it did and all that kind of stuff with, with the scoring and the yards and all that kind of stuff. But in the three big games, the production wasn't really there,
but
what
it is.
Howard Cross, like if you looked at the two of them, and I realize it's not like an either or situation from ESPN's perspective, but if you looked at the two of them, Howard Cross was much more consistent across the board than Hartman was.
Oh, so there's no doubt. There's no doubt. I mean, there are plenty of people out there that think that the quarterbacks that were on the roster not named Sam Hartman could have done what Sam Hartman did, in this offense. And there's a bit of a case to be made for that, right? I don't know that I would completely agree with it, but it is an argument I would listen to. You know what I'm saying? Like I do feel that way, especially, seeing the way that Steve operated the offense in the bowl game. Now, the Steve Angeli that we saw operate the offense in the bowl game is a completely different Steve Angeli than we saw at the beginning of the year. So, I mean, that does have to be taken into account, right? Would he have been as successful as he was, early on and in the middle of the season as he was, in the final game? Mm-hmm. I think there's an argument there as well. But did Sam Hartman take this team to the next level? I think we can safely say he did not. They took a step, but not, you know what I mean? So, yeah, I'm surprised.
Yeah, it's weird because, again, just in terms of numbers and that kind of thing, over the span of a 12-game season, he technically, statistically took it to another level. But again, big valleys in games that mattered as opposed to games you're supposed to win. So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, and he balled out in some of those.
Good on paper. Isn't that a movie or a show or something? Good on paper.
Well,
that's
yeah, no, I
but I mean, I do think it's significant that Notre Dame finds itself in the company of teams like Alabama had the most in the top 100 with 8. And then you've got teams like Michigan and Texas, 2 playoff teams, obviously. And then Georgia and Florida State, they each had 5. Oregon was tied with Notre Dame with 4. Missouri and North Carolina each had 4 as well. So I do think it's significant to have, this kind of talent evaluated. And then, you have Watts coming back, and we can probably look and maybe try to predict what Notre Dame players will end up in the top 100 next year.
Ooh,
maybe we'll do that at a later date.
Well, I will continue to trumpet Cam Hart. He probably should have been in the top 100, to be honest with you. Did not get a lot of love for his performance, but boy, did he have a great year.
Cam Hart and Benjamin Morrison both.
Yeah, absolutely. So, because I was thinking about next year, and I was thinking, Ben Morrison has an opportunity to, I guess, make this list, but, Cam Hart should have been on it this year frankly. And he had a better season than Benjamin Morrison. But Ben Morrison, I think, is going to have a great season as a junior. So, yes, absolutely. He should be on the list next year, no doubt about it. And then Xavier Watts should make a repeat performance. And then, we'll see. I think there's a lot of potential on the offensive side of the football. And the defensive side of the football. We just said Howard Cross. He's coming back too, right? So, I mean, there's a bunch of possibilities for Notre Dame to really make a imprint on this list.
It will. I see some of the questions in the chat about women's basketball, the loss yesterday, Sonia Citron coming back. So we'll touch on some of that in a little bit. I'll save a little bit of that. Got some more bowl talk, football talk here.
Yeah.
First, Kirk Herbstreit says the solution to bowl opt-outs, Vince, is eliminating the bowl games. Here's a quote from Kirk Herbstreit. Nobody wants to play in them. Don't play the bowls. Just have the 12 playoff teams. We'll get excited about those. And if you want to add maybe 5-6 bowls outside of that, then do 5 or 6. But we're getting to a point where it's ridiculous. We're putting 6-6 teams in bowl games nobody cares about. If the players don't want to play in them, hell with it. Don't have bowl games anymore. End quote. So do you buy or sell that from Kirk Herbstreit, Vince?
That's a huge sell for me because he's referring to the one that nobody wants to play in it. He's referring to the guys that are opting out. There are plenty of guys that love playing in bowl games. And I'm talking about the teams that aren't competing for a national championship that maybe might not even be in the top 25 or at the bottom of the top 25 or whatever. But are you telling me that, and I don't know all the details, right? But like Miami of Ohio, for example, you're telling me those guys don't want to take a trip to a warm weather city, play in a bowl game, get some swag.
Do they always get to go to warm weather cities, though, or do they get to go to Detroit and whatever that bowl is called now?
There's one that goes to Detroit, obviously, but I think they went to like South Carolina specifically.
Okay.
I think so.
It is hard to keep track of since there's like 40 schools now involved in bowls.
Could they minimize maybe a little bit? Okay. I would not have an issue with that. Okay. But I think eliminating them all completely together is not the way to go.
I mean, the dirty little secret of bowl games is the majority of them, they're making some money with their corporate sponsor. They're getting on TV, but the schools that actually have to go to them, it's a loss leader. It's like the coach gets to put on his resume that they went to a bowl, and especially for, like you said, like the MAC level schools and the group of fives and stuff like that. It's obviously an accomplishment for the majority of those programs to get to go to bowl games.
Miami of Ohio went to Orlando, by the way. They went to the Cure Bowl.
Cure Bowl.
Whatever the heck that is.
Like if you said Cure Bowl, you sure wouldn't have thought, oh yeah, Orlando.
No.
You'd actually been there.
I saw the logo and it had palm trees. I was like, okay, well, it's someplace warm. And then I had to continue to look up to find out that it was in Orlando. But the bottom line is you're telling me that those kids don't want to take a trip to Orlando in December?
No, I mean, you're right. Yeah, but again, like Orlando, Detroit, and some of these other places, it's like not everyone's getting to go to Orlando. Like New York City and the Pinstripe Bowl. That's at least unique because you're going to Yankee. I will say that I'm glad that I got to experience Notre Dame playing in the Pinstripe Bowl in Yankee Stadium at least once. Don't want to make that a regular occurrence, obviously, but there are worse environments you could be in than Yankee Stadium for a bowl game. But, look, these bowl games are first and foremost about TV content. That's what it is.
Yeah.
It's ESPN can put a 4-hour block of programming on and they can cover the month of December with bowl games. And between that and the corporate and title sponsors that come with them, that revenue and what sports wagering has blown up into, that's what is most of these, what most of these bowl games are about right now. You've got the, degenerate gamblers who they don't care who the opponent, who the teams are, what bowl they're in. They just want something to bet on. And that's good for business. And the way, it's all intertwined
absolutely
with the sport and the TV partner and this, the different, sports wagering apps and all that different kind of stuff. But the 500 part, I do agree with. I think we can all agree that the need for a 500 team and sometimes even sub 500 being in a bowl game is pretty lacking. You know, like
Agreed.
do we
It
really
needs to be
need
a
that?
reward.
Should
for
be at least a
winning
little bit
season.
higher bowl. Yes,
I
that's
agree
right.
with. So even if they up the standard to 7 and dropped a few bowl games, I think the overall majority of people would be okay with that. I
Right.
really do, because I do think there are too many bowls out there. I do
Yeah.
believe that.
And I mean,
there are
look,
too many.
when they do the aerial shots at some of these places, even in Orlando, I think it was the ReliaQuest Bowl when they did the overhead of that. It's
Empty.
like 90% of the upper part of the stadium. There's empty seats up there.
Oh my gosh!
You know?
I mean, it's becoming. I will say, and I guess I side with Herbie on this one. When he says nobody cares, he's talking about fans specifically, right?
Right.
The players care. The fans maybe not as much, because that's why the Sun Bowl was so excited to have Notre Dame there, because it was a guaranteed sellout. They're going to make more money and the whole thing. That's not normal, and we know that's not normal. The Sun Bowl has not sold out since the last time Notre Dame was there 13 years ago.
Yeah.
So that's why I get where he's coming from. They're not selling these games out. It's not like it's the playoffs for the NFL or something like that. They're not, and I don't even know. I'd have to see the
but
books,
that's also
right?
why they're a
breaking
loss
even?
leader for this, because they make the schools that are going to these bowls buy their $10, $15, $20,000 ticket allotment, and then they've got to turn around and sell them to their fan base. And that's why the schools that are actually going are losing money on this. It's like,
so that was going to be the next thing. It's like, okay, are the bowls making money?
right.
B, are the schools making money? Where's that cutoff? Like, I don't know where the level of bowl has to be when the payout is bigger, obviously, and everybody's going to make money on the deal. You know what I mean? Like, where's that cutoff? Because if you can find that cutoff and it's a very kind of obvious place, then everything below that line probably needs to go away.
I guarantee you Notre Dame lost money going to the Sun Bowl. Like, it's still good. They won their game. Like, they lost money going to the Sun Bowl, though, because the payout from the Sun Bowl to Notre Dame is nowhere close to even, like what a Citrus Bowl or obviously what a New Year's Six Bowl or any of those. Once you factor in your travel costs and getting your whole program, especially to a remote place like El Paso, Texas.
Oh, yeah. There was no good
everything
way to
that goes
there.
into that. Notre Dame's not making money going to the Sun Bowl. I guarantee you that. And neither is Oregon State.
I'm curious as to what the payout was for that.
I'm not sure, but again, it's nowhere in the ballpark of a New Year's Six Bowl or anything like that. So if you can find that, but
it says 4.5 million. My guess is you cut that in half. Does that sound probably right? I don't know. Well, here we go. Well, that's playoff. That's not going to help us. Notre Dame was not in the playoff. I don't know. Bowl game payouts. There we go. Anyway, we can continue on and get to where we need to go. But the thing is, you're not making money, and I totally understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, I mean, and obviously Herb Street's thing is about the opt-outs, and I just go back to there's still with all these conferences expanding at the waistline now, there still has to be something at the end of the season for the other 90% of the teams that are not making it. The 12 teams into the playoff is what, the 10%ish or something like that. There's got to be something for these other teams. You can't just say 12 are going to make it in and there's nothing for anybody else, because I've seen comparisons to the NIT, and Herb Street might have even made that comparison as well. But again, like when you look at viewership for these bowl games, which are still, even for the small bowl games, it's around, they're averaging around at least 1 million people watching for the small bowl games. I'm not talking about, like the playoff games and stuff like that, because there's obviously going to be more for that, but that's still more than an NIT basketball game. And while it stinks that there are so many opt-outs, there are still 85 guys on a roster, and like Notre Dame showed from just from their perspective that there are still guys who want to play, and you can still fill the team out there, and you can still use it as a development opportunity for your program. So if guys want to opt out, it's just more opportunities for the guys who are still left on the roster. So I don't think that ditch is, again, perfect world. Guys aren't opting out left and right and ditching all these bowl games, but there are still other guys on your roster who are getting scholarships and who can go play and use those opportunities. So I don't think you get rid of games just because some guys are opting out.
So I found this article, and I didn't know this, and maybe I just am out of the know, but it talks about what each conference gets, automatically every year, okay, for bowl season. And it says the Power 5 conferences with contracts to send its champion to the Orange, Rose, and Sugar Bowl, each conference receives $79 million to split amongst its people, okay? The group of 5 conferences that do not automatically have a bid, they get a total of around 103 million to split amongst themselves. That's all the rest, right? Notre Dame gets $3.89 million every single year, no matter what. Which I thought that was very interesting.
Irish Steel, you can have that opinion if you want, but I've had these conversations with administrators at Notre Dame. If they made any money, it's maybe, 10 or 20,000. They might have cleared the bottom line by a little bit, but they're not making any substantial cash by playing in the Sun Bowl. I've had these conversations with administrators before.
So
you're only really making money when you're going to a New Year's Six Bowl, which is obviously going to become the playoff. Now that's the only place that you're making real money. You can clear some, they a little, the bar is obviously like a little bit higher in a Gator Bowl, like they were in last year and those kind of places, but they're barely clearing the bar if you're going to the Sun Bowl. A couple $1 million, like you have no idea what the operating expense is when you're sending 85 players plus the staff, and then you're also sending wives, and you're chartering down. There's like so much that goes into it. There's so many costs that you can't even fathom by going to these.
And they're down there for
bowls.
A week.
Yeah.
They're down there for a week.
That's exactly. And it's like that. Those hotels aren't free. You're paying for those hotels, and again,
food,
it's not just the team. Yeah, it's the staff, and you're
the
feeding
charter
them.
planes.
Like, did you hear Marcus Freeman when he was talking about how many times they feed these guys in a day? That's no lie. Like the women's basketball team eats a minimum of 4 times a day when they're on the road. That's the women's basketball team.
Let alone football, yeah.
Plus the hotels that you're staying in. It's like,
yeah,
yes, really, Irish Steel, $2 million. Because again, you're talking about a week down there for a football team. I'm not going to go round and round on this. They're not making any money. I guarantee it. You're just going to have to take my word.
They're making $4 million automatically, and then an additional $2.5 million to go to the Sun Bowl. So that's $6.5 million. So they're making some money. That's all I'm saying.
Again, the expense to go to a bowl like that itself versus what they would make more payout is.
They would make way more money by going to a playoff game. Obviously, the payout's $6 million plus the automatic 4. No, that's 10.
But you're saying that's what they're automatically getting from the ACC, right?
Not the ACC. They get it from the bowl deal. It has nothing to do with the ACC. They automatically get, according to this article, they automatically get $3.89 million from the bowl system.
Okay.
So, and I don't know if they get a piece.
I'm talking about just payout from the bowl.
Right. That's $2.5 million is what they got.
Right.
And
there's
yes.
Right. There's obviously going to be other revenue.
Right.
That's coming in. Right. Okay. So my wife looked at me with a straight face this weekend and asked me if I actually wanted the Cowboys to make it to the playoffs. Now, bear with me here for a second, because this is not going to be about the Cowboys. This is
right.
A general overall. So I asked her if she was serious, and she said yes. And now we've been married for 30 years, and I told her it might be the dumbest thing that she's ever said to me. Do I actually want my team to make it to the playoffs? She said, well, you get your expectations up and then they lose every year. So wouldn't it be better if they just weren't in the playoffs? And so, again, I feel like this is a question that everyone can relate to. It relates to college. It relates to pro. Would you rather your team make it to the playoffs and lose than not make it to the playoffs? Is my question to you.
My answer varies, and here's why. Because normally I would say I want them to make the playoffs and lose. as opposed to not make the playoffs at all, right? But this year specifically, when the Cubs were easily into the playoffs with about a month to go, and then they just hit the schneid, right? And it's like, you know what? I'm okay with them not making the playoffs because they were going to get beat anyway, and now I don't have to invest emotionally in that situation. So like this year, maybe I was just like making like excuses for myself because they went on the schneid and didn't make the playoff at the end of the day. But I knew they weren't going to advance in the playoffs. Like normally when you get into the playoff, you're like, hey man, it's a new season. You got everybody's got a shot.
You could handle it. You weren't brokenhearted because they didn't make it in.
I really wasn't. Like because I knew the way the Cubs were constructed, they weren't advancing. Like there was no way they were advancing. They didn't have like that 1-2 punch on the mound. They didn't have somebody that was on fire at the plate. Like it just wasn't going to happen. So like I was okay with that. But every other scenario, and so let's bring it back to college football. I would want them to make the playoff because if you're in the playoff, you got a shot.
That's right.
So, yeah.
That's exactly right. And I don't care how painful it might be when they actually go out. Sometimes it's more painful than the others. Like if your team goes in, which has happened before with the Cowboys, as an example, they've gone in as the number 1 seed and they were bounced early by the Giants, and that completely stunk. And in that case, it's like I wasted a whole season on this. And I think, but like this question has come up in the past, like when Notre Dame has been thumped in the 2 times they've made the college football playoff. And we've had fans say, like we're better off not going to the playoff than getting embarrassed and losing these lopsided games. But I will tell you, just what you said, every time, sign me up. Take those beatings year in and year out because you have, knowing what the result is going to be obviously changes your perspective. Once you know what the answer is, it changes your perspective. But going in, you don't know what it's going to be. You still do have hope. I mean, isn't that why you invest every Saturday or Sunday or, that's why you're investing all that time and emotion in it, because you want to get to that holy grail. Ultimately, and you can't reach that if your team is not in the playoffs. So absolutely, like
always,
they might stink it up and bow out, and a week from now my answer might be completely different. But as of today, I am telling you, just get in, baby, and you've got a shot. Just like Steele said about his Irish Steel 63 said about his Pittsburgh Steelers. And no, I don't begrudge you, even though I was pulling for the Ravens to beat them the other night. But, you beat a team with a backup quarterback, and just like Brent said, the Rams, the Rams starters beat the 49ers, the Rams starters beat the 49ers backups. Okay. But like from my perspective, and again, I might be singing a different tune next week when the Cowboys play the Packers, but I was a lot more excited about seeing the Rams having to go to Detroit than I was the potential of them. Like that's the team that I've been dreading.
Is the Rams?
The Rams. They've gotten better and better all year long, and I did not want to see them. And now they're going to Detroit, so that's an interesting matchup. But
it's
bottom line, get into the playoffs. I will never say that I don't want my team to make the playoffs.
I really hope that your Cowboys can win. Yeah, I'm going to be a Cowboys fan. There's no doubt about that this weekend.
One day.
Hey, I'm not anti-Cowboys, but I'm definitely pro-Cowboys when it comes to them playing the Packers.
Playing the Packers.
That's for sure.
That's right.
Man,
That's right.
The love that Love was getting on Saturday or Sunday afternoon was barfomatic, my friends.
I didn't get to see any of that, fortunately.
It's horrible.
Yeah. All right, let's shift it to college. Interesting fact that I saw the other day. 2 years ago, Washington paid $675,000 to play an FCS opponent, Montana, and they lost to Montana. Well, this weekend, Montana finished as the FCS runner-up, losing to South Dakota State in the FCS National Championship game. Tonight, Washington plays in the FBS Championship game, of course, against Michigan. So just interesting little turn over the last couple of years, where those
It's a-
programs have come from.
It's amazing what recruiting in the portal can do for you.
That's right. And a
Just
new head
saying.
coach, I
And
guess.
a new
too,
head coach,
right?
yes. And good coaching. Absolutely.
That's right. Okay, I just thought I'd throw that little tidbit out there. Scale of 1 to 10. What is your confidence that tonight will be the last time Jim Harbaugh coaches Michigan?
I still think it's pretty high. I mean, I don't have like any inside knowledge or anything like that, but I still feel like I'm at like an 8 here. I don't look, Jim Harbaugh is not an idiot. Okay.
That this is the last game. You're at an 8.
Yes.
That this is the okay.
Yes.
Just want to make sure we're on the same page. Okay.
I just feel like he's not stupid. He knows that there's stuff coming down the track here as far as the NCAA. Now, it's going to take a minute. I think we can all agree on that. But I just feel like there's stuff coming. And if he sticks around, it's going to make things even more difficult for him than they are right now. Like this Connor Stallions thing is not over. The recruiting violation stuff, that's not over. Like there was FBI involved with whatever's going on up there.
Michigan dropped their whole, remember that they had their lawsuit and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And once they saw like what the NCAA had on them, they dropped that suit pretty quickly.
Yeah, exactly. They're like, oh no, we'll definitely take that as a quick punishment here.
And we haven't even heard what all of that is.
There's stuff coming down the pipe. Okay. And that's, again, you say what you want to about Jim Harbaugh, but he's not an idiot. And so this is the best opportunity for him to jump ship to the NFL. And I believe I heard that he hired a new agent who is
an NFL agent.
Yeah. Like, I don't think that was a big surprise, right? And so right now, I think the Chargers job looks pretty appealing to him. It sounds like the Patriots job might sound pretty appealing if that ends up opening up.
The Raiders,
are, So
Raiders are still open, even though they had an interim and Antonio Pierce and all that stuff. But
I think 8 might be low, but I'm going to go with an 8.
Yeah, I'm going with a 9 even. But like this just feels like a Pete Carroll situation because of all the stuff that you just said. It's like knowing when the time to get, and he's obviously dabbled there the last couple years. He's had these talks. I think if he had his way, he would have been the Vikings coach a couple years ago.
And there's a reason that he's got this extension on the table, and the extension says you have to promise not to go to the NFL if he signs it, and he hasn't signed it yet.
Hasn't signed it.
What does that tell you?
Right.
That's
an extension that's been widely reported that hasn't been signed yet, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's out there. We know about that.
Correct.
A lot of people know about that one, right?
I know where you're going with this.
But yeah, it just feels like especially if he's able to win this. I mean, this is a guy who's been in the Super Bowl before. He has coached in the Super Bowl before. He's got a really good track record in the NFL. And, he's put all this into it, got his alma mater back to where they are right now.
Yeah.
And especially, I think if they could win this tonight, then it just sets him up, to kind of ride off into the sunset and make his exit back to the NFL. Sharon Moore, maybe ends up being the head coach up there after he showed what he could do, in one of Harbaugh's 2 suspensions this year. So it just, I don't feel like, I feel like everything seems to be saying bye-bye Jim Harbaugh after tonight.
I agree. I think it's very akin to the Pete situation out in Southern Cal. I really do. Like, he's not an idiot either. And he saw the writing on the wall, and it came hard, and it took a long time for USC to recover basically from that. Now, there was some sketchy coaching hires and some things like that, but those coaches that came directly after him, they were fighting an uphill battle because of the sanctions, and nobody thought anything worse of Pete Carroll when he went up to Seattle and had the Legion of Doom and everything else go on up there. The same thing's going to happen for Jim Harbaugh.
Ira still wants to know, would he be a bad character for cutting and running rather than facing the music by staying?
Is Pete Carroll a bad character? Do we think that? I mean, I never liked Pete Carroll, but like, that's because I root for Notre Dame and
Right.
USC's.
All of Pete Carroll's, or most of
mean-
Pete Carroll's players have loved Pete Carroll.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
look at what he's done in his time in Seattle. It has been very successful. This has been one of the few years like that he's had a bad team.
Sure.
Since he's been back in the NFL. And that's been a long time now. When you
Right.
think about that.
So you can't really separate Pete Carroll and Jim Harbaugh, in my opinion. And so if you think Pete Carroll's a good guy, then I guess you got to think that Jim Harbaugh is.
If Michigan's going to face some kind of consequences, whether it's vacation of wins or some kind of, reduction in scholarship or whatever it ends up being, if Michigan ends up paying some price, they're going to pay it with or without Jim Harbaugh. So
right. The way the system is set up, why would he stick around? I mean, if I was in his shoes, I would bail too. I would.
Yeah. I mean, I said at the time, I think that if the NCAA, like they very rarely like hand out financial,
right.
That fine head coaches and things like that. This is a coaching matter. It's not a recruiting matter. Like you're not cheating in the recruiting circles. This is like, they can try to deny, whether or not he knew anything about it and all that kind of stuff. But ultimately, it falls on the head coach. Hand out a hefty fine and just be done with it.
Right.
I think.
This is 100% on the coach. It's 100% on the coach. Now, the Michigan program allowed it to happen. Whatever you want, like the athletic department allowed it to happen. It would be a much easier pill to swallow for me to say that the athletic department didn't know about the stuff that was going on, right? But it's still under their purview.
Somebody was reimbursing Connor Stallions.
100%. There's no chance that Jim Harbaugh was clueless and just had no idea where all of Connor Stallions' information was coming from. There's
Connor Stallions was shelling out literally thousands of dollars to pull that whole thing off. He was not eating that on his own. Whether it was, whether it was a back channel, an alum someplace, or like Uncle Petey or whoever that guy was, that they were trying to pull out of. Somebody was paying Connor's, and like I'm sure you saw the picture of Connor Stallions with the shaved head and shaved off the goatee from the Rose Bowl last week. It's like,
I sure did.
Look, thought that was hilarious.
The money may have been coming from a booster, and that's okay. I get that. But again, Jim Harbaugh is not an idiot. He has to know the information was coming from somewhere. Maybe he wasn't asking specific questions, to try to cover for himself, but he knew darn well Connor Stallions wasn't breaking their code signs in the first quarter. Like you know what I mean? He's not an idiot savant.
Yeah.
He was getting that information. He had it early on in every game, and Jim Harbaugh was using it. And so he knew darn well something was going. Now, whether he turned a blind eye or not, that's a different conversation. I'm not saying that Michigan itself funded it, but it sure wasn't Connor Stallions. So, yeah.
This is an interesting one from Irish Gordian now. Why is the entire Notre Dame fan base rooting for Michigan tonight? I don't get it. I didn't know that anyone was rooting from Notre Dame was rooting for Michigan. This is
they are not.
I've heard
because
this.
I'm definitely not, and I'm part of the Notre Dame fan base. So, yeah, no chance. No chance.
Yeah, I think others would beg to differ.
No way. There's no way.
Not happening. Yeah, I had not seen that myself.
I am a huge Washington fan tonight. And then you add on to the fact that a former player of mine is a coach over at Washington. Just adds to the fun for me. So not just mine, but he went to a school we coached at and Jesse's good friends with and the whole deal, right? So
he and Jesse were co-captains their senior year together.
So how can we not root for Washington just on that fact alone?
Yeah.
That we know somebody on the staff, right? So known him since he was 14 years old.
Austin Huff had a nice article about Shaq in the Tribune over the weekend.
Interviewed the wrong guy for it, but still a good article.
Could have gone to the freshman coach, got all kinds of juicy stuff from the freshman coach. So Michigan's favored by 2.5. everyone on the IB staff picked Washington. So shocker.
Yeah.
It's like, I am worried about that because this is one of the few times that like I'm making a pick based on what I want to happen.
I know.
As opposed to, looking at but I still think like
But
when
still,
you add it all up,
yes,
there's enough there. Michael Penix is a much better quarterback
correct
than Milroe. The offensive line that Washington has is the Joe Moore Award-winning line. It's better than Alabama's offensive line. The skill talent, starting with Adunze, is better than what Alabama had. The defense, I think, might not be quite at the level of Alabama, but at the same time, I don't think it's that far a step off. And so when I stack everything up, I just think that Washington's got a much better chance to score a few more points than what Alabama scored last week, and it at least make it difficult for Michigan to score points.
That's what it comes down to for me is offense, and we've talked about it a million times. You've got to have an offense to win in this championship. I think Washington's offense is a heck of a lot better than Michigan's offense. Their quarterback is better. I think they've got better skill guys. The only thing that's better, in my opinion, is maybe, Blake Corum. He's a really good running back. So maybe that's the one box that gets checked for Michigan if we're comparing offenses. I know Michigan's defense is good, but I think Washington's defense is good enough to stop Michigan's offense. And I think, I think I said this on the show, the first team to 30 is going to win this game. And I don't think Michigan gets to 30. So that's why I went the way I went. I think Washington does get in the 30s, and I don't think Michigan does. And so that's where I'm at.
Derek's going a little bit higher scoring than me. He's got 45-28 Washington. I've got them both in the 20s myself. A little bit lower scoring.
Okay.
But that's
what did I say? I don't know.
Did you build a parlay? Did you build a 3-leg parlay?
I built a multi-leg parlay, actually. An actual legitimate one.
3 legs is multi-leg.
Well, you're right. So. You're absolutely right. It you are 100% correct. It is more than it is multi.
Yes, by definition.
Let me see if I can find it here. But I absolutely did because I made a bet on the Michigan game and lost. And so I had one of those bets where it gives you money back if you lose, like one of those guarantee type things, but you could only use that money towards tonight's game.
Okay.
So I was like forced to bet on it, basically,
Gotcha.
or I lose the bet. So here's my parlay right here.
Okay.
Washington on the money line.
Okay.
Michael Penix, 250 yards or more.
Okay.
Passing. Michael Penix, 1.5 touchdowns passing over. Adunze, 80+ yards.
Okay.
Receiving. Polk, 50+ yards receiving.
Man, this is how many legs do you have in this?
And Adunze in the end zone. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
What's the
6
payout?
legs. 10 for 25 or 75, excuse me. 10 to win 75.
Wow. 6 legs and all you're going to win is $75 if you hit that thing?
Yeah.
You should win at least like 250 off that. That's a lot that's got to happen.
It's plus 750 is the odds.
All right. So, well, yeah. I only built mine 3 legs.
Okay.
And mine's 10 to win $60. So I think mine was like plus 600 basically. Yeah,
okay.
That sounds right. So I got Michael Penix 300+ passing yards.
Okay.
I've got Blake Corum anytime touchdown score. And I've got the game to go under 55.5. Like I said, I feel like this is unless Michigan's offense just goes nuts out there. I've got Washington winning 27-24. So I've only got 51 total points.
Okay. Okay.
So
the one I put together was one that was like, so what DraftKings does is they have a couple like that are set up for you. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like that looks like, yes.
And I saw some of those, but there's always like
one part that you're like,
yeah,
exactly.
Really trust that one.
I agree with you, but this one, and I think the reason it's only plus 750 is because these numbers are kind of low.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? I think they're very attainable. And so I was like, you know what? That looks like a good one. I got $10 to spend here. I'm going with this one. It was all pro Washington. Let's have some fun.
Yeah. Steele likes all but my under, basically. So.
Well, he likes here. This is what he said for me.
I don't know. It's going to be close. I mean, you get a
Yeah.
flurry of points in the first quarter, and that one's probably out the door. But
he said yes, 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 maybe, likely. So there on my 6. So there you go.
I don't feel like I still think Washington's or Michigan's defense is good enough that Washington shouldn't just go nuts tonight. Like I said,
agreed. I don't think they're going to go nuts.
Points,
yeah, I agree. I don't think they're going to go nuts, but I do think they have a good chance to maybe spread the ball around. I think Penix is going to make some plays.
Yeah,
I do.
Straight up picks. The only New Year's 6 playoff game that I missed was Alabama Michigan last week, and it took overtime to do it. If Alabama had just hung on, I would have won. I would have been feeling really good if I had bet a parlay.
I know, right? Seriously, just a bunch of money line parlays.
Otherwise, there's always one game that wrecks it.
Always.
So I'm kind of glad that I didn't.
Every time.
That's right.
Every single time. It's the way.
All right, so you alluded to those Packers a little bit ago. And after the end of the season and the Bears losing to Green Bay yesterday, most of the debate now is on whether or not to stick with Justin Fields,
right?
Draft quarterback at number 1. You're on record. You like them sticking with Fields, trading down, building the roster around him. At least that's what you said a couple of weeks ago. I don't know if you still are on that.
It's like you don't want to have egg on your face, and then Caleb Williams is like a generational quarterback, right?
I know.
And it's a definite possibility, okay? Yep. I just wish the generational quarterback didn't go to USC and wasn't just a jerk.
There is that.
I mean, if he goes out and wins Super Bowls for the Bears, obviously I might change my tune. But I do feel like the way to go, because if you bring in Caleb Williams at the number 1 pick, okay, you better have a real good plan about how you're going to rebuild this offensive line, because Caleb Williams is going to be running for his life, and it doesn't matter how good of a quarterback he is if the offensive line is as bad as it is. And they've got other things that they need to address as well. It's not just a quarterback issue. You know what I mean? So I feel like this is a, the sum of the parts kind of a situation. And so I do at the moment think they should stick with Justin Fields and build around him.
Okay.
I do.
Well, here's my question today.
All right.
Can they keep both Justin Fields and Matt Eberflus? They've already, as of right now, as we speak, Eberflus seems to be safe, and they have said, the reports out that they're keeping him. Can they keep both of them? If they're keeping Justin Fields, can they also keep Eberflus as the head coach?
They can. They can.
Should they?
I'm not upset with what Eberflus has done. I'm not. I think he's doing the best that he can with the pieces that he has in place. Now, if they go out there and they do what I think they should do in the draft and in free agency, because they have a ton of money to spend too, Sean. They have a ton of money. So if they can go be active in free agency, have a good draft.
They have a ton of money. That some of that money is going to go away if they decide to keep Fields, because he's going to have to be.
This is true.
A franchise quarterback's.
They're going to have to franchise him. They're going to have to do obviously something, and the franchise tag is obviously more than he's making now. But they're still going to have money to spend, and they're still going to have plenty of draft capital to use in this draft. And like Ira Steele said, Joe Alt would look pretty good in a Bears uniform, Sean. I'm just saying.
I mean, personally, he'd look better in silver and blue, but he's not going to last.
He's not going to be around for a playoff team.
They do have a pick at number 9, even without trading down. They've got 1 and they've got 9. So there's a good chance.
Is that 9? Okay, so the Bears pick is 9?
Yeah, well, I mean, they've got number 1 overall, and their second pick is at number 9.
Is it 9? Okay, I wasn't sure where that one landed.
Yeah.
You might still be able to get Joe Alt at 9. I just don't know that I don't know if I would want to take that chance. You know what I mean? But you could get him at 9. He may still be there at 9. Because I think there's some I'd have to talk to Ryan about this, but I think there's some debate about who the number 1 tackle is. And so if he's considered number 2 on somebody's board, he could still be around at 9.
There's him and another guy. I can't think of his name.
Yeah, I can't think of his name
it's
either.
Escaping me right now. But someone was just saying that there's multiple. Mike was saying multiple reports that Getsy is gone. was looking. I don't see like it. Getsy's status, the offensive coordinator, is in question, but it doesn't look like he's necessarily gone as of right now. And that's, to me, if you're going to keep Eberflus, I do think you've got to get rid of Luke Getsy, the offensive coordinator, because, here's what I know. Justin Fields has started for the last 3 years now, and he hasn't been to the playoffs. But Jordan Love has been a starter for 1 year, and guess who's in the playoffs right now? The team that Chicago loves to hate, right?
This is true.
With Jordan Love, who had a franchise quarterback type season. He threw for over 4,100 yards and 32 touchdowns. What did Justin Fields do? Half as many touchdowns, 9 interceptions, a much worse quarterback rating, lower completion percentage. Now, he ran for a little bit more, but the rushing yards still well down from the 1,100 yards that he had last year. It's just like his reads are slow. He still takes too many sacks for a guy who's as mobile as he is. So it's like, if you're keeping both Eberflus and Fields around, I think you've got to find an offensive coordinator who can figure out exactly how to get the most out of Justin Fields. Because to me, has he improved in the 3 years he's been there? Yes. But does he look like a franchise quarterback to me, especially when you compare him to the other two, even 3 quarterbacks in the division, even though Cousins is probably gone in Minnesota? Like, he's the 4th best quarterback in the division right now. So do you need more talent? Yeah, but it's not like, Jordan Love has Jaden Reed and Romeo Dobbs. It's not like he's, like DJ Moore is better than either one of them, but there is a lot that they've got to figure out. They do need a better offensive line. There's a lot that they still need, but Eberflus has won 10 games in his 2 years. They were still, the Bears roster still seemed invested in their head coach these last few weeks, even, when the results, kind of seemed a little bit obvious. So again, I personally wouldn't probably keep both of them around, but I think if you are going to keep both of them around, you've got to jettison the offensive coordinator and go find someone who can at least give you, a better chance to get a better investment out of Justin Fields if you're going to build the roster. There are good things there. Like, I saw it when they played the Cowboys last year. I was like, man, this another year, Justin Fields, it should look really good, but it just hasn't.
Yeah.
It's been too incremental. It hasn't taken off the way you would want from a former number 1 pick.
No, I get it. I totally get it. And DJ Moore had a great season. He had career highs in receptions and yards and everything else. So, I mean, they're getting him the football. I just think that the O-line is really holding them back right now from a run game standpoint and from a pass protection standpoint. They need to get better on the O-line, and they need an elite pass rusher too. So, obviously, who wouldn't want an elite pass rusher on their team?
Montez Sweat.
Yeah, no, he's good. No,
pretty good.
They did a good job of acquiring him.
Yeah.
I will say that they did a good job of acquiring him. So it's going to be interesting the next few weeks / months, really, because you're going to get into the draft in obviously April. But it's going to be interesting.
Many months for draft talk coming up. That's right.
Yes, we do. We got to get to the playoffs first, and that's a whole month's worth of fun. So.
Mark said, thoughts on Florida State and Georgia Tech playing week 0 in Ireland. Do you see this international game becoming more common? I will be curious to see what happens. I mean, you can still, even with the playoff, if they move the season up a little, will they do away with week 0 stuff? Or, I'll be curious to see kind of what they do with some of that kind of stuff. But as of right now, I mean, it seems like, why wouldn't you? Whether it's Ireland or even, maybe London or something like that. I would think that you see some more of that kind of stuff.
Yes, the international game becoming more common, absolutely. And then I think you're going to see more than one a year when it's all said and done, too. I don't think it's just going to be one team or one game, going international. I think it's going to be multiple moving forward, because especially at the college level, because you can couple that with educational stuff. And I mean, it's super easy to do, whether they're actually doing that stuff or not. But you can easily couple the education piece with the football piece very, very easily.
Yes. So John says the Notre Dame women's basketball team is in real trouble. There were some other comments earlier. He said injuries and low production from the bigs, except for Maddie. I mean, like, the good news is Sonia Citron came back yesterday after almost 3 months out. The bad news was obviously it's like you get one back, and now Maddie
lose another
Westfeld's
one.
got a
Yeah.
concussion, so
Yeah,
they do
that
without
hurt.
her. And
them not having her, I think, was the biggest hurt in that game.
no, it really was, because
Yeah.
she is such a big part of the flow of the
Yes.
offense. Her versatility, she knows the offense. She's been there for 4 years. And so to not have her and to try to sort of piece things together, I was a little bit surprised with the overall production of the bigs yesterday. But again, you didn't have Westbeld to kind of be part of that rotation and keep the flow going. And I think that was the biggest thing. I think if you have Westbeld, they win that game yesterday, point blank.
I absolutely agree. And they, they got to get healthy. I mean, that's for sure. They need to get healthy, and getting Sonya back is huge. There's no doubt about that. But yeah, Maddie Westbeld being out, you got to think she's worth at least 3 points, and that's what they lost by, right? So
I mean, she averages almost 15 a game. So
I mean,
and she'd been averaging a double for that
Right.
matter, really, for like the last 5 or 6 games or something like
so I
that.
mean, just her presence alone is worth 3 points. You know what I mean? And so I think that is what obviously hurt them in the long run. You would like to think that you can pick up for players going down, but she's one of your best players.
Yeah.
That's tough to do.
Look, and it's not going to get easier either, because like NC State was undefeated until yesterday. They lost on a buzzer beater to Virginia Tech. The ACC is going to be really tough, but I do think once they're back to 100%, and like for what they've got right now, 100% is going to be getting Westbeld back. That's going to be the team the rest of the way, because it's going on a year now since Olivia Miles' injury, and I'm not like, there's no inside information that I necessarily have there, but just looking at where she is, if she hasn't played by now, because she does get out there and not like full practice, but she shoots and does some other stuff. It's like she's gone almost a full year at this point. I can't see her wanting to try to come back and just sort of like push this last couple months of the season at this point. So
that's a shame, because I mean, you want to talk about a shot of adrenaline that she could give the team if she was actually 100%. I mean, if she's not, then obviously there's no point in burning a redshirt year. I mean, this essentially would be her injury redshirt year.
But I don't fault her for not wanting to try to push it, any sooner than what she has, because it's it's a knee injury, right? And she had surgery on that knee. And again, February was when it happened. So to try to come back like by even October when practice started and into November, it's a little bit too soon. And again, now you're midway through the season. So I don't think that it was worth it for her to try to push it back if she didn't feel 100% comfortable, being able to do that. So
it makes
I don't
sense.
blame her at all. I don't
either.
Yep. But I think they'll be okay. I don't think there's any reason to hit the panic button. I think once they get, like I said, to full strength with what they've got, I think they'll be all right. But just bad timing that Maddie took a shot to the head against Pittsburgh last week and, wasn't able to come back when Citron came back yesterday.
Right.
Because Sony looked good. And I, listened to the post-game press conference. She said she had some cramping in her calves late in the game, which you can see because, again, like she hasn't had to push it full strength, in a real game for almost 2 months. So I don't know. She looked good.
She did. She looked smoother than I kind of anticipated.
Yeah, I did. I thought so as well. Just kind of watching her shoot, a little bit, the last, like last week, like it's hard to tell when they're not going 100% what exactly it's going to look like when they're wearing one of those knee braces like she's wearing
right
now.
No, totally.
But again, I think they'll be okay. It's just a matter of getting them all back and getting into a little bit of a groove, but it's not going to be easy by any means, but they're going to have NC State, which was ranked 3rd before that loss to Virginia Tech, they've got NC State, Virginia Tech, and Louisville all still coming in here to Notre Dame this season. So they've got some big home games that they're going to get to play, against some of those ranked teams. So some big opportunities coming up.
Totally.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for tonight. National championship game. Of course, man, it's going to be starting here.
Yeah, man.
What's your bet? Do they start before a quarter till? Do they actually kick it
Oh.
off before 7:45?
Usually there's like 11 minutes or so. I'm going to say they kick off before 45, but I'm not holding my breath.
I'm going to say 7:45.
That's
my bet.
I'm being positive, I think. I don't know.
All right, so we'll dig into some of that tomorrow and some other topics, of course, as well. And again, the big news today: Ethan Long committing to Notre Dame, the safety out of Connecticut. We started the show with that. So Marcus Freeman and the crew continue to recruit at elite level, and we'll have more of that on the site at Irish Breakdown. Subscribe, rate, review, hit the like button before you leave, and we will talk to you tomorrow on IB Nation Sports Talk.
Go Huskies.